It's a horror, high school, time traveling, body swapping, alien invasion comedy about high school. It makes Inception look like Thor. It's basically the most awesome movie ever made.
Yeah, that's okay. Subtle. I like it.
The #1 agenda of this movie was to make a youth culture film for youth culture as they perceive information today. And I don't even call it filmmaking, I call it information. I'm in the same age bracket as you. And you have to realize that when we were teenagers, it was a completely different world. We didn't have the internet. We had to learn the internet, you know? The kids today have the internet instantaneously. And they have a certain expectation. Like, the way they even watch movies is different. They may be watching the movie on one screen, and on the next part of it, they're Skyping, and another part, they're giving the answer for Wikipedia on another, and they're looking at porn on the fourth part, you know? It's like, and at the same time, they're texting, you know? So it's like, you know, the way they process information is so much more accelerated, but the vast majority of movies are just so slow and so sold to them. I decided, okay, why don't I make a movie that challenged them, that really worked at a speed and level and complexity that they're engaged the whole time.
Yeah.
So that was the reason behind the way that it was made. My co-writer and I, Mark Palermo, is from Mark Palermo is a film critic from Canada, and it's an interesting thing in that me being in England for the last 10 years, I was heavily influenced by English comedies. You know, and the verbal skills and things and especially English comedy is, the English are masters at taking social events and ridiculing someone, you know? It's like you're so class conscious, you know? All your comedy is based on class consciousness, you know? Like if someone has the wrong accent, you're done, you know? And that whole idea of not wanting to be embarrassed, it's something that I really took off Ricky Gervais and things, and Graham Linehan, you know? So like I took a lot of those elements and sort of subtly put it underneath an American context. And, you know, and Mark being from Canada, he's got a little bit more of a British sensibility anyway, so a little bit more than, say, your average American writer. So if you look at a lot of situations, a lot of the verbal stuff, it's like this movie about people being embarrassed, and that comes straight off of like looking at British comedies.
Yeah.
Well, that's specifically why, at its core, it's a time travel movie, because I wanted to compare and contrast. Because the generation today, even though it's only 20 years, in fact, it's 19 years in the movie, is so radically different than, say, 20 years ago. Because 20 years you didn't have the internet, like, and that affects a lot of things. Like 20 years ago, remember, like 20 years ago in 1992, we had the Rodney King riots. You know, like it was a very fractured society. There was white people and there were black people and Asian people. Who the f know where they were? Sorry, you can bleep that out. You know, but today, if you look at kids today, they're so progressive. You know, like the music is all integrated, the fashion is integrated. You know, a white kid can be best friends with a black kid, be dating an Asian kid, whatever, stuff like that. Like this new generation of kids are so progressive. They're like they're the least racist, you know, least sexist, least homophobic, you know, most open group of kids ever, and they have an accelerated way of looking at things. You know, you cannot make movies like you did, like with John Hughes 30 years ago for these kids, because it doesn't speak to them anymore. You know, so like one of the things about putting so many genres in there is that if you think about genre, and this movie is a movie that plays with a lot of genre. Genre is a way of filtering out a story using a set of social tropes tied to a location, right? That's why there's a Western. It's set in a very specific location with a certain set of rules. That's why there's like a science fiction, a certain place with a certain set of rules, right? High school is not a genre. High school is a location. Within that high school, one kid could be living a horror film, one could be living a romantic comedy, one person could be living a sexcapade. It depends.
Which I think kids are.
Yeah, what story are you telling about these kids? And each kid has a different story. So when I wanted to do this macro view of high school today, that's why I put every genre in there to have them all combat against each other. And here's the funny thing is, because kids today are so intermixed, and the nerds aren't really nerds anymore, and the jocks may know, like back 20 years ago, if a jock said, I like Indiana Jones, he's a freaking nerd. Today, like you don't even blink because, you know, because the way they interact with media is so different. Like everybody walks around with like a little nano that has an infinite number of songs. That changes the way that you perceive entertainment. You know, to talk about entertainment now on a daily basis is normal. Like, what do you talk about? What did I see? You know, what am I listening to? Even jocks will identify themselves by the music they listen to now.
Absolutely.
And that was not the norm 20 years ago. So the genres, the social tropes of what you're used to have got to change too. So you have to like rip apart these genres and fuse them away in new ways, because those are the kids. The kids don't live in the same genres that those movies were. And so Detention is an attempt to make a whole new genre by ripping them apart and mashing them up. Well, I think now Torque's turned into a cult film, but it's still on over a global level the stench of a million critics stabbing it to death. The blood is still there, you know. So there's a small group of people that are appreciating it more and more. And quite frankly, honestly, Detention. This is what's going to happen with Detention. It's very obvious from the screening reactions that the target audience, which are the kids that it's made for, react very positively to it, and also people our age. That have perhaps a younger soul can appreciate it and are more relevant. And like, by the way, if you're like over 30, you better still be tied into music some way. At least be aware of it. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to get completely lost in this thing. So it's a very specific thing. But you know, the way media is today, you got to filter a movie like this to get to the kids. You got to get to the loudest voices, and the people with the loudest voices happen to be these guys at newspapers that are 50 years old, that will never laugh at an umbop joke, you know. So to be very fair, it's going to be the same thing like Torque. This movie is going to get trashed by mainstream critics, even though there is a core audience out there that loves it. The difference is there's a lot more blogging, there's a lot more vlogging, there's a lot more social networking. So the only way this movie is going to survive is if people out there like decide by themselves to talk about it and take away that sort of crazy jail that these guys want to put this into. Ultimately, just as I made Torque, I'm confident with what it was meant to be and who it was made for. And ultimately, I can't judge it by the people that it wasn't meant for. Like if Richard Roper trashes it, well, it wasn't written for you. Sorry, bro. Like you've got salt. I've got this for other people. Like Dane Cook, I've known him for many, many years, is a really nice guy.
He was just vicious.
He's a really sweet, nice guy. And one of the things that is interesting, if you look at this, look at what Dane did. He's known as like that sort of good-looking comedian guy that all the girls love. And what does he play in this film? The principal. You know what the principal is? The most hated, like nerdiest character you can possibly have in a high school movie.
Absolutely.
And he did it fearlessly. He made himself look bad, and he wanted to do it just because. You know, he thought the role was funny, and he wanted to help me out and work with kids. That's amazing. So you know, as much as everybody like I don't know why they attack him.
No, success. I think just the same as always. He was tremendously successful.
It's mind-boggling. You know, the sort of heat he takes on stuff like that. You really have to become very political, and you have to be a really good reader of people. The social skills of a director are completely. Like ignored by film schools. Like film schools try to teach you how to make movies, quote unquote, but if they don't teach you how to be social on set, they really haven't taught you how to make a movie. Well, I think that ultimately you should see Detention because it's going to entertain the crap out of you. That's the number one thing. Like the biggest reaction you get out of it is laughter, you know, but also it's meaningful too. It's a meaningful laughter. You're going to laugh so hard because it's relevant and it means things to you. Like I believe that comedy doesn't work unless comedy tells you something. And the reason why people are laughing so hard at this is because it's very relevant to their lives. You're going to learn something about youth culture. You're going to learn something about yourself if you're heading into your 40s. You're going to learn something about like what it's like to be 40, you know. And if you're young, you're going to find out something about your culture and specifically to the youth culture that I specifically made it for. There's going to be a great lesson in this movie. You know, it's a journey about a girl that has to find herself. Everybody's living in their own genres. The film's called Detention, and in the movie, everybody lives in their own detentions, in their own lives, and they can't see past each other. And you know, one of the things that sort of triggered me into writing this movie was Columbine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, those two boys ran around shooting other kids in the head, and there were these school shooters, and you always heard that they were bullied and things like that. People come up with excuses for that, and when I read the book on them, that gave a bit more research, it turned out that those guys actually had pretty good families and girlfriends. I didn't have a girlfriend in high school. I didn't get to go shoot around people because it's like, so ultimately, if you look at the movie, it's about people trying to empathize. Those guys literally couldn't see outside their own genre. They were trapped in their own little action flick. and they refused to see that there was a tragedy over here, and you know, and there was a drama over here, and everybody had their own little genres they're living in. When you live in your own genre, and you graduate high school and you don't realize there are other genres around, you have failed high school.
Yeah.
And that's Detention. Like, the movie will tell you that very clearly by the end of it. You know, you want to graduate high school, you have to empathize with other people, otherwise you have failed. My family is from Seattle. My father is from here, and I took summer school here for three summers in a row. And it was actually in one of those summers in Seattle when I was testing out of like my algebra courses, being a good little Asian boy, that I decided to become a filmmaker.
Okay,
it was
cool.
in Seattle, so it has a certain meaning for me. And then the other aspect of Seattle is that it was my first time that the film really popped at a film festival. It was like the right audience who
Yeah.
reacted to it. It was that weird combination of a very sophisticated progressive audience that had a sense of humor.
Cool.
It was a good mix, and I appreciated that. And it was only from that audience that it suddenly taught the rest of the world how to perceive this film.
Nice.
So on opening day, for good luck, I want to be back with this audience.
All right, cool.
I'm going back into commercials and music videos. I'm doing a LeBron James Sprite commercial for China. I work with China a lot these days. And I'm going to try to pay off the rest of this movie.
All right, Joseph Kahn, thank you very much for doing the DList interview. We appreciate it.
Thank you.